Your family hates you. The words cut through the chamber like broken glass dragged across stone. For a moment, there was silence so complete you could hear the flicker of the cameras clicking, their lenses desperate to capture every twitch of expression. The insult, so cold, so deliberate, did not just land, it echoed, ricocheting around the room. Lingering in the air like a poison cloud, Barron Trump leaned back in his chair, lips curled into a smirk far too rehearsed for his years. He thought he had found the fatal blow, the kind of line that would not just sting but unravel. His posture set at all, chin tilted, eyes darting toward the crowd, waiting for laughter, waiting for validation. Arrogance was not just dripping from him, it was flooding the space. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett did not move. Her stillness was its own thunderclap. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't reach for words. She simply looked at him, steady and unbroken. And in that silence, the balance of power began to shift. Her expression was not pain nor surprise, but something sharper look that seemed to whisper, "You don't even know what's coming." The chamber was restless. A cough here, a gasp there, the audible rustle of reporters' notepads as pens raced to record the insult that had just been hurled. The words weren't just personal, they were tabloid gold, headline material. Trump's son humiliates Congresswoman. That was the story Barron thought he had written in that instant. But arrogance always miscalculates. Camera zoomed in, catching the sweat beginning to bead near his temple. For a boy raised in gold-plated towers, this was his chance to prove he belonged in the ruthless theater of politics. He thought cruelty was currency. He thought humiliation was victory. And so when he delivered that cutting line, believed he had secured his place in the Trump legacy. But power doesn't lie in insult. It lies in how the insult is answered. Jasmine shifted only slightly, leaning forward just enough to let her presence press against the weight of his smugness. She didn't need words, yet her silence was louder than his outburst. And in that unshaken quiet, the audience felt it. The tension thickened, pulling every listener closer. So the entire country was collectively holding its breath. Social media lit up in real time. Phones glowed across the room as fingers tapped frantically. Did you hear what he just said? Is he serious? Clips began to circulate before the sentence had even finished echoing. Memes, outrage, disbelief, the digital tide was already turning. Barron didn't even know it. He thought he had written her ending. In reality, he had just written his own. Because words like those, designed to humiliate, often reveal more about the speaker than the target. They reveal insecurity, masquerading as bravado, entitlement dressed up as courage. Barron's line wasn't strength. It was desperation. And Jasmine, unmoved, knew it. For a heartbeat, the chamber was his. But history belongs to those who wait. The cameras lingered on her face, searching for cracks, searching for evidence that his dagger had found its mark. Instead, they found steel. They found a calm resolve that spoke louder than any insult could, but the words Barron thought would destroy her, the narrator whispers, as if guiding the audience into the deeper story, became the words that destroyed him. The room buzzed. The moments stretching longer than time itself. Something was coming, and everyone could feel it. A clash not just between two people, but between two Americas, one built on dynasty and arrogance, the other on dignity and truth. And what happened next would leave even Trump's loyalists stunned. Asterisk. To understand the weight of that moment, you have to step back. This was never just about an insult tossed across a chamber. It was about legacy versus labor, about what it means to earn respect in a country where some inherit thrones while others carve their place with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. For Barron Trump, the insult was not random. It was strategy, or at least the kind of strategy taught to him by the dynasty whose name he bears. His entire existence has been a performance in the shadow of a father who demands loyalty but rarely gives affection. Every word Barron speaks in public carries the pressure of proving he belongs, not just in politics, but in the myth of Trump power itself. His smirk wasn't confidence. It was camouflage. It was a boy trying to convince the world, and maybe himself, that cruelty could fill the void where substance should be. But on the other side of that smirk stood Jasmine Crockett, a woman who didn't inherit her platform. She built it, brick by brick, case by case, standing in courtrooms, defending the voiceless, standing in communities where the cameras never came, standing on the shoulders of people who sacrificed so she could even be in that room. Her presence was not an accident of birth, it was a victory of perseverance, and that is why his words mattered. Not because they were true, but because they revealed the contrast that defines American politics today. Barron represented dynasty without discipline, name without merit. Jasmine represented service without spotlight, grit without guarantee. One wielded privilege like a sword, the other carried dignity like a shield. The stakes weren't personal, they were generational. Millions of Americans watching that clip online weren't just seeing a boy insult a congresswoman. They were watching entitlement test itself against experience. They were watching the Trump brand attempt once again to bully its way into dominance. And they were waiting to see if this time finale arrogance be met with something stronger than fear. This is why the chamber seemed to lean forward after Barron's jab. Everyone sensed it. This wasn't over. This wasn't just a cheap shot that would land and vanish. There was something deeper coming. Jasmine's silence was the promise of it, because silence from a woman like her is not retreat. It is calculation. It is the pause before the hammer falls. Barron, of course, didn't recognize it. How could he? All his life, silence had meant deference. Silence had meant people folding before his family's wealth and notoriety. He mistook Jasmine's stillness for weakness, not realizing that her strength was gathering, waiting for the perfect moment to be unleashed. And that is where the stakes sharpen into clarity. This was not just a battle between two individuals. It was the embodiment of America's choice. Do we value the loud arrogance of inherited power, or the quiet strength of those who rise despite the odds stacked against them? In that chamber, Barron wasn't just attacking Jasmine, he was attacking every person who has ever been told they don't belong. Every immigrant family who has fought for legitimacy. Every worker who has been dismissed by the privileged elite, and Jasmine's presence was a reminder that belonging isn't gifted. It is claimed so the insult wasn't just offensive, it was a test. Could dignity withstand dynasty? Could authenticity silence arrogance? Could a woman born of struggle stare down the smirk of inherited entitlement and emerge unshaken? The cameras kept rolling. The crowd kept waiting. The nation kept watching. And in just seconds, the balance of power would shift. Asterisk to see Barron Trump clearly in that moment. You have to understand the stage he was standing on long before he ever entered the chamber. He was not just another face at the microphone, not just another voice in the debate. He was the heir to a brand, a dynasty, a name polished and weaponized by years of spectacle. He carried a legacy wrapped not in public service, but in golden towers, tabloid headlines, and the echo of chants at rallies where substance was traded for sound bites. From the day he was born, Barron's path was carved in marble. The son of privilege raised behind gates taller than most people's dreams, his childhood was a spectacle of excess. He was photographed in designer suits before he could tie a shoelace, guarded by Secret Service while millions of other kids walked themselves to school. He didn't just grow up in a bubble, he grew up in a fortress. The kind where reality doesn't seep in unless it is carefully curated. Asterisk, and with that upbringing came a lesson. One taught not in classrooms but in boardrooms and ballrooms. Whispered by advisors and echoed by family, power is inherited, not earned. Politics for him was never about policy, compassion, or conviction. It was a stage, and his last name was the ticket. Asterisk. That is why his weapon of choice was family. To Barron, family was the ultimate trump card, pun intended. When he leaned across the chamber and sneered, "Your family hates you," he thought he was striking from the high ground. After all, his entire life had been an exercise in watching his father wield family as a shield. "We are the Trumps," they would say, as though the name alone was proof of authority, respect, loyalty. Asterisk, but here lies the hypocrisy. The very thing he tried to wield as strength was the very thing his own dynasty could never secure. Family loyalty in the Trump household was never unconditional. It was transactional. It was performance. It was loyalty not to love but to image. Asterisk every headline over the years betrayed it. Siblings suing siblings. Whispered feuds behind the golden walls. Children competing for the throne of their father's approval. His father's marriage was tabloid fodder, unraveling under the public eye with scandal after scandal. His half-siblings often seemed more like rivals than allies, clawing for inheritance, relevance, and recognition. Even his own mother was more often spoken of in terms of designer fashion than maternal devotion. So when Barron used family as a blade, it revealed the hollowness of his arsenal. He was a boy throwing stones from a glass palace, unaware that the cracks in his own walls were visible to the entire world. Look closely at the image he projects, the smirk. Carefully practiced in mirrors that reflect back only privilege. The dismissiveness, the way his chin tilts ever so slightly downward, forcing others to look up at him even when they are standing on the same floor. The reliance on inherited privilege, the assumption that his last name is enough to silence opposition. These are not traits of strength. They are symptoms of insecurity disguised as arrogance. And arrogance has a rhythm. It enters a room like a conquering general, chest out, voice sharp, gaze cutting, but beneath it, always, is the tremor of fear, the fear that someone will see through the costume. Barron carried that fear like a shadow, invisible to him but obvious to those who watched closely. His bravado was not built on achievements, not on battles fought and won, but on the illusion that lineage could replace labor. Consider the contrast. Jasmine Crockett's silence in the face of his insult was not emptiness, it was calculation. But Barron's smirk? That was not calculation. That was desperation dressed as dominance. A boy trying to convince himself that he was untouchable. Even as history whispered that every dynasty eventually cracks, his use of family as a weapon was not just hypocritical. It was tragic. Because in doing so, he revealed exactly what he lacked: authenticity. True strength does not need to borrow the language of belonging. True leaders do not mock others for what they imagine to be weakness. They confront their own. Barron had never been taught this. He had only been taught that cruelty was applause-worthy, that dominance was proof of leadership. That arrogance could be mistaken for confidence if delivered with enough volume. And yet, arrogance has one fatal flaw. It always exposes itself. In that chamber, when Barron delivered his line, he thought he had landed a knockout. But the very choice of words revealed more about him than about Jasmine. It revealed a boy raised to see love as leverage, loyalty as performance. And politics is a family business where the only qualification required was a last name. The cameras captured it all. The smirk, the arrogance, the performance of superiority. But they also captured the cracks. The bead of sweat. The slight falter in his eyes when Jasmine didn't crumble, didn't lash back, didn't show the humiliation he expected. He was a villain unaware that the script was already turning against him, because villains don't always fall when they are shouted down. Sometimes they fall when silence exposes the emptiness of their words. Barron's downfall didn't begin when Jasmine responded, it began the moment he revealed himself. His insult was not a strike of strength. It was a confession of weakness, and the irony was unbearable, in trying to prove himself in his father's shadow. He wasn't standing as his own man. He was echoing a dynasty's tired tactics, repeating cruelty without conviction, wielding family as a weapon in a way that only made his own fractures more visible. The audience didn't need
Jasmine to answer yet.
They already saw it. They saw the performance unraveling. They saw the arrogance exposing itself, as it always does. And they leaned in, waiting because they knew what he did not. Arrogance may enter with a smirk, but it always exits in silence, and silence was coming for him. Asterisk. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's silence carried such weight, you must understand the road that shaped her. She was not born into a golden tower, nor did she inherit her place in history. Her story begins in the neighborhoods where hard work is not a choice, but survival. Where opportunity is something you wrestle from the jaws of doubt. And where dreams are always one setback away from being stolen. Jasmine grew up in a world where struggle was not an abstract word, it was a lived experience. She watched parents, neighbors, and mentors sacrifice daily just to keep families afloat. Bills stacked high, hours stretched long, and dignity often felt like a luxury. In those streets, love wasn't measured in headlines or handshakes, but in who showed up for you when no one else would. That is why Barron's insult about family was not just an attack, it was a wound. Aimed at the core of what Jasmine valued most. Asterisk because for her, family meant more than shared blood. It meant loyalty, sacrifice, the ties you forge in struggle. She had seen what it meant for mothers to work 2 jobs to put food on the table, for fathers to go without so their children could have shoes, for communities to rally around each other when the system looked the other way. To dismiss that, to weaponize the very word family against her, revealed how little Barron understood about the ground he was standing on. Her journey from those roots to the chamber where she now sat was paved with battles he could never imagine. She did not arrive by inheritance. She fought her way here, one obstacle at a time. She studied harder than those who doubted her, worked longer than those who dismissed her, and carried the scars of a system that too often told her she did not belong. Asterisk. Law school was not a playground of privilege, it was a battlefield. She entered courtrooms where clients had no one else to defend them, where the odds were stacked, where the fight was not for headlines, but for justice. She saw injustice up close, watched as the powerful bent rules while the powerless paid the price. And through it all, she sharpened her voice not as a weapon of cruelty, but as an instrument of truth. As a lawyer, she became a shield for the vulnerable. She stood between ordinary people and the machinery of a system that too often chewed them up and spit them out. Those victories rarely made the news. They didn't come with applause or viral clips, but they built her into the woman who could sit in that chamber, unshaken by a boys. Smirked her entry into public service was no less arduous. Campaigns where money was scarce but conviction was plentiful. Nights where exhaustion whispered that she should quit. Where opponents used every trick to push her aside. Where the machinery of privilege told her she wasn't meant for the halls of power. And yet she pressed forward. She won not because the path was easy, but because she carried the weight of countless voices who had no seat at the table. Every barrier, every insult, every attempt to dismiss her hardened her resolve. She learned that dignity was not given, it was claimed. That belonging was not inherited, it was fought for. That true leadership was not measured in headlines, but in the quiet, relentless work of service. This is why Barron's insult did not pierce her. It only revealed his ignorance. When he said, "Your family hates you," he showed that he thought family was a photo opportunity, brand, a name to be polished. For Jasmine, family was the very reason she fought the sacrifices of her parents, the resilience of her community, the loyalty of people who never abandoned her, even when the world tried to, and so when he tried to turn that word against her, she did not flinch. Because to her, the insult wasn't truth. It was theater, and she had lived too much reality to be shaken by a boy who confused cruelty with strength. Jasmine represented something Barron could never touch: American grit. She embodied the story of millions who rise despite every obstacle, who claw their way through doors designed to stay shut, who transform hardship into resolve. She was the daughter of struggle, the lawyer of the voiceless, the public servant who carried more weight in her silence than Barron could ever muster in his smirk. And that is why the chamber waited on her response. Because everyone watching knew, consciously or not, that she carried the kind of authority no last name could buy. Her authority was earned, not inherited. Her strength was built, not borrowed. Her voice had been forged in the fire of struggle, and it was only a matter of time before she used it. Every hardship she had faced, every night of doubt, every barrier of prejudice, every sacrifice made in silence, had not broken her. They had become blades, sharpened by experience, ready to cut through the facade of arrogance that Barron wore like armor, and she was about to use them. Asterisk. The chamber had shifted from shocked silence into a nervous buzz. Like the low hum of a storm just beginning to gather strength, Barron, sensing the tremor of attention and mistaking it for victory, leaned forward in his chair. His chin jutted out with the sharp arrogance of someone who had never been told no, his smirk widening as though Jasmine's silence was submission. "Your family hates you," he repeated. Louder this time, savoring each word as if it were a blade he could twist deeper. Cameras snapped again, capturing the moment he believed would become his triumph, the youngest Trump proving himself a worthy heir to his father's empire of insults. The audience stirred uneasily. Some shifted in their seats, others whispered behind cupped hands. Even allies of the Trump name glanced at one another, questioning whether Barron had overstepped. Yet Barron saw only an open field. His smirk sharpened into something nastier. "See? She won't answer," he jeered. "Because it's true. Because the people closest to her can't even stand her. She doesn't belong here. She doesn't belong anywhere." The cruelty in his voice wasn't spontaneous, it was rehearsed. He had studied his father's cadence, the cutting rhythm of a man who weaponized humiliation. And now he tried to wear that armor himself, believing it would shield him. But the fit was wrong. It sagged on him like a borrowed suit, oversized and unearned. Jasmine still said nothing. She sat, composed, her eyes fixed on Barron with a look so calm it was unnerving. She was not rattled. She was calculating. In her silence, her refusal to play his game only fanned his arrogance. "Cat got your tongue?" Barron pressed, tilting his head. "Or maybe you're just used to being ignored. I mean, come on, Crockett, your own family couldn't stand by you. Why should the American people?" The words landed heavy in the air, each one dripping with disdain. The audience recoiled, gasps threading into murmurs. Even the cameras, unblinking and merciless, seemed to hesitate before flashing. Barron mistook the discomfort for dominance. His shoulders squared, his grin widened. He leaned closer to the microphone and chuckled. "Face it. You're nothing but a lonely voice pretending to matter. A stray dog barking at a family dinner she'll never be invited to." The insult was cruel. More importantly, it was overreach. He had gone too far, pressed too hard. And in that overreach, he'd unwittingly built the stage for his own undoing. Because while he saw silence as weakness, Jasmine's supporters knew better. They had seen her fight before. They had watched her dismantle bigger bullies, sharper tongues. They recognized the stillness in her posture, the measured gaze in her eyes. This wasn't retreat. This was the calm before the storm. The tension was unbearable. The chamber leaned forward, waiting, holding its breath. Barron had repeated himself, mocked, exaggerated, his words circling like a predator convinced the prey had nowhere left to run. But Jasmine Crockett was no prey, she slowly inhaled, her hands steady on the desk before her. And in that moment, the murmurs cut off. The chamber froze. Every eye turned to her, every camera lens sharpened. Even Barron's smirk faltered for half a heartbeat, as instinct warned him that something had shifted. The silence grew thick, suffocating, almost unbearable. Then Jasmine finally opened her mouth and everything stopped. The chamber had grown so still it was as if the air itself had frozen, waiting. Barron's smirk lingered, though faint cracks showed at the edges. He had delivered his lines with the confidence of a prince rehearsing his coronation. Now he sat back, expecting Jasmine to stammer, to break, to give him the victory his father had promised could be won through cruelty. But Jasmine didn't stammer. She didn't break. She leaned forward ever so slightly, eyes steady, the ghost of a smile forming at the corner of her lips. Her pause stretched long enough to sting. Long enough for Barron to squirm without moving, long enough for the crowd to lean closer. And then, with a voice calm as still water, she began. "You said my family hates me." The words were soft, but the microphone carried them like steel through glass. The chamber stirred. Finally, she was answering. Barron's smirk returned, wider now, certain she was walking straight into his trap. Jasmine didn't rush. She let the silence breathe, let it throb in the chest of every listener. Then she tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing on Barron like a surgeon preparing her scalpel. "At least," she said, her voice low, deliberate, every syllable weighted, "I don't have to buy my family's love, or pretend they even respect me. The chamber gasped, as if struck by a sudden wind. Barron blinked hard, caught off guard, his smirk evaporating in an instant. The silence stretched again, but now it was on Jasmine's terms. And she wasn't finished. You sit there, wrapped in the name you inherited, not the one you earned. You wear it like armor, hoping people won't notice how hollow it sounds when you speak. But we notice, Barron. America notices, the crowd murmured, a ripple of recognition passing through them. Jasmine's voice grew sharper, the rhythm tightening. You want to talk about family? She gestured lightly, hand cutting the air. My family may struggle. We may fight. But we have one thing yours will never have. Authenticity. You've lived your whole life in a house where loyalty is a transaction, where respect is a performance, where even love has to be bought, staged, or demanded. That's not family, Barron. That's captivity. Gasps again, followed by a wave of murmurs that rolled through the chamber like thunder. The cameras flashed, desperate to capture Barron's face, pale now, lips pressed thin, the heat rising in his cheeks. Jasmine didn't let up. Her voice sharpened, but her delivery remained measured, almost surgical. You mock me, hoping silence will break me. But silence doesn't break me, Barron. Silence builds me, because when I'm quiet, I'm listening. I'm watching, and I'm waiting for the right moment. And this is that moment. The words struck like lightning, the chamber lighting up with energy. A low rumble of applause broke out, quickly hushed by the gavel, but not before the sound echoed against the marble walls. And then the kill shot. Jasmine leaned in, her voice dropping, intimate, direct, every word a dagger. You thought saying my family hates me would destroy me. But the truth, it destroyed you. Because everyone here knows, and deep down, so do you, that you've spent your whole life trying to earn a father's respect you'll never get. The room erupted. Gasps turned into exclamations, exclamations into cheers muffled behind hands. Reporters scribbled furiously. Phones lit up as live tweets streamed into existence. Crockett just ended Barron in 10 words. By your family's love? I felt that in my soul. This belongs on TikTok. Mic. Drop. Applause emojis flooded imagined screens. TikTok edits already taking form in the collective imagination. Jasmine's calm face, Barron's crumbling expression. Captions flashing, "This is how you end a dynasty with one sentence." Barron tried to speak. His lips parted, but no words came. His throat bobbed, his cheeks burned crimson. He shifted in his seat, clutched at his notes, glanced around for help that wasn't coming. The arrogance that had carried him minutes before now weighed him down, heavy and suffocating. Jasmine, meanwhile, leaned back, her face serene, the faintest smirk playing on her lips, the smirk of someone who knows she has just rewritten the story. Her voice cut one last time, quiet but lethal. You wanted to prove you were your father's son? Congratulations. You just reminded everyone why America is tired of the Trumps. The eruption was unstoppable now. Gasps broke into murmurs, murmurs into claps, claps into outright cheers. The gavel slammed down, but even its pounding couldn't suppress the roar of energy in the room. Reporters shouted questions, phones buzzed, tweets multiplied. Barron tried. Jasmine finished him. This moment will be replayed for years. Crockett. Calm, precise, legendary. Barron's face flushed deeper, his hands trembling slightly as he shuffled his papers. Desperately avoiding the cameras that refused to turn away, he looked smaller now, swallowed by the very spotlight he had once craved. Jasmine had not only countered his insult, she had inverted it. Flipped it so perfectly that it became a mirror exposing everything fragile about him. Her words didn't just win the room. They rewrote the narrative, the air of arrogance crumbling before the grit of authenticity. And as the chamber buzzed with awe, one truth crystallized in the air. Undeniable and unforgettable, the villain had crumbled. The hero had ascended. The words had barely left Jasmine's lips before they took on a life of their own. The chamber still buzzed with murmurs and half-muted applause when the first clips hit social media. 30 seconds later, hashtags began to climb. By the time the hearing wrapped, They were everywhere. Hashtag family over dynasty. Hashtag Crockett vs. Barron. Hashtag mic drop moment. Twitter-now X was the first battlefield. A clipped video of Jasmine leaning in, voice calm as thunder before the storm, racked up hundreds of thousands of views within minutes. The caption read, "At least I don't have to buy my family's love." Underneath, retweets cascaded, each one adding fuel to the fire. TikTok followed like an avalanche. Teenagers spliced Jasmine's words with reaction clips of people fainting, screaming, tossing their phones. One edit showed Barron's smirk dissolving in slow motion, overlaid with dramatic violin music and the words, "Dynasty dismantled." Another looped Jasmine's final line, "You just reminded everyone why America is tired of the Trumps," with a bass drop. The comment section exploding in fire emojis and applause gifs. Asterisk on Instagram reels spread faster than wildfire. Influencers reposted the clip, their captions a chorus of approval. This is leadership. Crockett ate and left no crumbs. When authenticity walks into the room, arrogance walks out, and on YouTube, entire reaction videos sprang up overnight. Podcasters paused mid-topic to watch the footage live, gasping and laughing. Their comment sections filling with viewers typing in all caps, "She ended him," or "New Queen of Congress." The memes wrote themselves. One showed Barron's frozen expression with the caption, "When you realize your allowance can't save you." Another, a side-by-side of Trump Tower and Jasmine's quiet smile, labeled "Fake Gold versus Real Grit." Screens overflowed with laughing emojis, mock funeral memes, and endless variations of Rip Barron's confidence. But it wasn't just comedy. Commentators on both sides of the spectrum weighed in. Unable to ignore the magnitude of what had just unfolded, journalists called it the takedown of the year. One columnist for the Washington Post wrote, "In less than a minute." Jasmine Crockett didn't just silence an insult. She reframed the very idea of what power looks like in America. On CNN, a panel replayed the clip 3 times in under 10 minutes. "Notice her timing," one analyst pointed out, pausing the footage at Jasmine's deliberate silence. "She lets him drown in his own arrogance before delivering the line." That's courtroom strategy meeting political theater. Even late-night comedians pounced. Within hours, monologues aired with punchlines like, "Barron Trump learned tonight that you can't buy love, and you can't buy a clapback either." Studio audiences roared. Hashtags flashed across screens. And the echo chamber grew louder. But perhaps the most surprising voices were from political rivals. A Republican senator, no fan of Jasmine, remarked in an interview, "Look, I don't agree with her politics, but I know a knockout when I see one." That was a knockout. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders praised Jasmine as the embodiment of grit. This one Congresswoman tweeted, "Is why representation matters. This is why truth matters." The post hit 1 million likes within hours. Across the country, ordinary people connected Jasmine's moment to their own lives. Comments flooded in. "As an immigrant, this hit me. People have mocked my family too. She spoke for us. I've been told I'd never measure up. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett showed us we can flip the script. She made me proud to be an American again." For millions watching, Jasmine's calm dismantling of privilege wasn't just about a debate. It was about dignity against dynasty, truth against arrogance. It was about proving that no amount of inherited wealth or famous last names could compete with authenticity forged through struggle. Barron, meanwhile, became the butt of an endless joke. On college campuses, students mimicked his silence. One viral video showed a frat boy pretending to smirk before being hit with Jasmine's line, collapsing dramatically as his friends burst into laughter. Memes of Barron clutching invisible notes spread. Some edited him into famous movie scenes, Titanic. The Lion King always cut off before his character could respond, captioned, "Still searching for a comeback." The humiliation was inescapable. For Barron, the insult that was meant to define Jasmine had instead defined him. His arrogance became the meme. His silence became the punchline. His failure became the story. And Jasmine, She became more than a congresswoman. She became a symbol, a new face of resistance. A reminder that calm truth can still defeat bluster, that silence can still roar louder than arrogance. The moment carried weight because it wasn't just about Jasmine versus Barron. It was about America. An America tired of dynasties, tired of entitlement, hungry for authenticity. In her measured takedown, people saw their own frustrations released, their own dignity defended. As the night wore on, the hashtags only grew. Hashtag family over dynasty surged past 1 million posts. Hashtag Crockett vs. Barron hit #1 worldwide. Influencers turned the phrase into merch overnight t-shirts, mugs, hoodies bearing Jasmine's words, and through it all, one truth pulsed stronger than any meme or soundbite. Arrogance had been shattered, and dignity had risen in its place, but the story wasn't finished, because Jasmine Crockett wasn't content with a single clapback. She had something deeper to say. Something bigger than Barron, bigger than the chamber, bigger even than the viral storm engulfing the nation. She was about to turn an insult into a universal truth. Asterisk. The chamber was still buzzing with energy when Jasmine finally leaned back, her words already echoing far beyond those marble walls. But she wasn't finished. Her clapback had silenced Barron, yes, but Jasmine knew the moment called for something larger than a victory over one privileged heir. It called for a lesson, a truth that America needed to hear. She straightened her posture. Eyes no longer fixed on Barron, but lifted toward the audience, toward the cameras, toward the millions who would watch and replay this moment. Her voice softened, but its gravity deepened. Drawing everyone closer, family, she began, isn't about bloodlines. It isn't about a last name. It isn't about who your father is or how many towers your family owns. Family is about loyalty. It's about sacrifice. It's about respect. And those are things no amount of money can buy. No dynasty can guarantee. The words fell like truth carried on wind, undeniable. A hush fell again. But it was no longer the silence of tension. It was the silence of recognition. She continued, her voice steadier now, building momentum. You see, America isn't supposed to be a place where dynasties rule. America is supposed to be a place where everyday people, the children of factory workers, immigrants, teachers, nurses, can rise on the strength of their grit, their service, their love for this country. That is the America my family believed in. That is the America I still fight for. The contrast sharpened with each sentence. On one side stood the Trumps, fractured, selfish, bound together not by love but by image. Loyalty always conditional, respect always purchased. On the other stood Jasmine, not born into power but forged in struggle, carrying scars that became her armor, and a purpose that became her compass. And she spoke directly to those watching who needed to hear it most. I know what it feels like to be told you're not enough. I know what it feels like to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be insulted. But I also know this. Your worth isn't decided by your last name or by who claims you. Your worth is in how you show up for others, in how you fight for dignity, in how you give respect, even when you don't get it in return. The chamber, once filled with arrogance, now pulsed with inspiration. Some nodded quietly, some whispered to one another, but everyone listened. She pressed forward, her voice rising like a crescendo. The truth is, dynasties can collapse. Wealth can vanish. Names can fade. But dignity? Dignity lasts. Service lasts. Courage lasts. And those who stand on those things will always stand taller than those who hide behind gold-plated. Doors reporters scribbled furiously, knowing these lines would be quoted, replayed, etched into headlines. Social media feeds lit up again, clips of Jasmine's words subtitled and shared with captions like, "This is what leadership sounds. It's like indignity greater than dynasty." And then she delivered the line that sealed it. Her voice slowed, deliberate, each word struck like a bell. In that moment, she said, glancing toward Barron for the briefest heartbeat before turning back to the chamber, "I want America to remember this. Dignity always speaks louder than dynasty." A murmur of approval rolled through the crowd, swelling into applause that could not be contained. The gavel struck, but the sound of hands clapping overpowered it. It wasn't just applause for a debate point. It was applause for a truth that had been missing for too long. For those watching at home, the message carried further than politics. It became a reflection of their own lives, their own struggles. Children of immigrants whispered Jasmine's words back to themselves like a mantra. Workers shared the clip on break, nodding as if she had spoken for them. Parents replayed it for their kids, saying, "This is what you need to hear. This is what matters." And as the sound of applause filled the chamber, the moral clarity was undeniable. Jasmine had transformed an insult into a lesson. She had taken Barron's attempt to weaponize family and reframed it into a universal truth about loyalty, sacrifice, and respect. She hadn't just shut him down. She had lifted everyone else up, and the story, far from ending, was now reaching its emotional peak. Because what Jasmine had sparked inside that chamber was about to become a movement outside it. Asterisk. Your family hates you. Those 4 words were meant to humiliate Jasmine Crockett, to shatter her composure, to paint her as weak. Instead, they stripped arrogance bare. They revealed the hollowness of a dynasty built on fear and performance. They turned a weapon meant to wound into a mirror that reflected the villain's own emptiness. And in that reflection, America saw the truth, because in the end, this was never just about Barron Trump or Jasmine Crockett. It was about the clash between 2 Americas, one clinging to inherited power, desperate to bully its way into legitimacy, and another grounded in service, sacrifice, and dignity. One drenched in arrogance, the other rising with truth. Jasmine's calm defiance reminded us that service will always outshine dynasty, and truth will always outlast arrogance. She showed us that family is not about bloodlines, but about loyalty. Not about wealth, but about respect. And in that moment, she proved that courage can transform cruelty into clarity. So now, it's your turn. If you believe courage must always speak, louder than cruelty, share this story. If you believe dignity must always rise above dynasty, subscribe for more moments where truth wins and arrogance falls. Let this not just be a video you watch, but a reminder you carry, no matter how loud arrogance speaks. Dignity speaks louder. The final image lingers. Jasmine walking steady, her head high, her words echoing long after the camera shut off. Behind her, Barron sits small in the very spotlight he once craved, swallowed by silence. And with that, the story closes not on his insult but on her triumph.